Turf Talk with Drew Miller.
On this week's episode of Tiger Turf Talk, we host Mr. Jim Buttar, the head groundsperson for the Rugby Football Union. This is such a fantastic episode with such great content. We get into different aspects of what it takes to be a professional, how one can become successful through strong work ethic, and what it takes to maintain a rugby pitch at the highest level in one of the most iconic stadiums in the world, Twickenham in London. Mr. Buttar was phenomenal. He helped us understand what it takes to push through the adversity and work hard and learn how important it is to have a positive outlook, not on just yourself, but on the entire crew that you're working with. And to understand that when it comes to the personalities and the needs of your workers, how much a role you play as a leader. He dives into different experiences he had in his past, how he worked through the night in Egypt when he was working with a consulting company because his workers were unable to eat during the day because they were practicing Ramadan. It's phenomenal to listen to, and it's something you guys don't want to miss. It truly was an honor to have him on, and we cannot thank him enough for everything that he's done for our kids. We had an absolute blast, learned so much about turf grass and what it takes to be successful at the highest level. We hope you enjoy this episode of Tiger Turf Talk. Good afternoon, everyone, and good evening. We have a phenomenal guest on today. We have the head groundsperson of the Rugby Football Union, Mr. Jim Buttar. Again, I said both names wrong, so I apologize for that. How are you doing today?
I'm all good. I'm good, Drew. Thank you very much.
Well, we can't.
You're right. I think
I told you it gets worse every time.
I was going to say you just pretty much briefed me on how bad these intros are. And
I know. I apologize.
You delivered.
Hey, I got the Rugby Football Union. That's one part, right?
The boss will be happy. My boss will be happy.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
We actually made the connection over social media, and it was sort of just me contacting you and seeing everything that you do and how impressive everything is. What is the name of your stadium, so that I don't get that wrong as well?
So it's Twickenham Stadium. So it's
Twickenham.
Actually, so it's in a suburb or district of London. So it's in southwest London. But yeah, so it's Twickenham district, and obviously the stadium sits within that. So yeah, Twickenham Stadium.
Sounds good. I'm not going to say anything because I don't know how to speak. So, sort of to start it off, obviously here in Virginia, over in the U.S., we take care of a Bermuda grass base, overseeded ryegrass. You do a sport that I think the traffic just is exponential compared to what even our professional football does. Because there's so much effort and different ways that rugby is played that puts a wear on sort of your turf. What is it that you're doing as the groundsman, as the head groundsperson at such a iconic place for the sport of rugby?
So with regards to the sport rugby, I mean, it's a very physical, intense game. Like I say, with regards to your national football, it's quite centered and runs right down through the middle of the field. So you pretty much know where your wear is going to be. With rugby, we have generally a good idea because the fly halves, the kickers, they tend to be right-footed. But they tend to send the ball that way. So we tend to have a good idea of where we think the scrums are going to be set. But the scrummage in itself is quite unique in the sense that it's 8 guys on each side, and they're pretty much contesting the ball. But the kind of traction and the weight that goes into that, I mean, it is a phenomenal amount of tolerance that's expected out of the turf, and it has to perform each time they do it. So at Twickenham, it's It's a hybrid turf, so it's stitched. So it's a Deso Grassmaster, which I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with after speaking to a few guys you've had on already. So the structure's there, so it's sound, it's safe as a surface. It's actually just trying to keep the grass and aiding it to recover after those usages. So it's I'll probably say that's probably the harshest part. They tend to train quite intensively as well. So we have what's called captain's runs. So the teams they get to train the day before the game. So they get an hour on the field, and it varies. Sometimes they'll come in and they might just have a walk around the stadium, have a bit of a meeting and a huddle in the middle, and the kickers might just do 20 minutes and just get familiar with the points behind the goals, so they can actually just get themselves sized up in terms of distance and things. And then you get, for instance, like England Rugby, the head coach really likes to have reasonably intensive sessions. So that includes the captain's run. So they'll come out for an hour and they will go for it. So it's quite an intensive session in that sense. So yeah, the sport itself, it's a very physical sport. They do spend a lot of time. They do move over the entire field in open play, so that's not so bad. But it's just those set pieces. So line-outs and scrummaging where they're contesting the ball. That's like the really kind of hard sort of wear that the pitch will receive. Again, half of our battle is actually not you're preparing the pitch for the game, but it's actually what we try and do afterwards as well. So there's loads of small things that we try to kind of get in place on the build up to a game, with the aim of being that turf is as strong and as healthy as it can be to be able to withstand the wear first off, and then actually be able to recover quite quickly afterwards. So yeah, we a lot of it's actually just such small things that we're kind of dealing with, but it all adds up. So if you imagine a pie chart, I mean, 80-85% is nice and easy. It's your basic turf maintenance, but then yeah, it's just the little things that you're trying to just squeeze that little bit extra out of it to get to perfect, which you never get to.
How big is the space? Do you know, in comparison to like a football field here in the US, 160 feet wide versus what would yours be length and width wise?
If you're going to start talking imperial to me now, aren't you?
Sorry. My bad. Oh man. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Let me see if I can convert that real quick.
I'll tell you what we'll do. We won't worry about the maths too much because mine's absolutely terrible as well. Essentially, it's a hectare. So that's the amount of grass we have. In terms of the field itself, it's 120 meters by 70. So it's quite a big space, quite a large.
Much larger.
Yeah. I know that the NFL have actually been at Twickenham. This was before I was there. So this is in 2016, I think it was. And you can actually see that they obviously had to make the pitch a lot narrower for your guys to smash it up.
Just run right down the middle.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So you were sort of talking about it right there. How did you arrive at this position? You have an incredible career at different roles, different places. How did you find yourself there at Twickenham? If I said that right, I apologize if I didn't. And
no, that's right. Yeah.
How have you sort of taken those experiences and sort of transitioned to them there with the Rugby Football Union?
So in terms of how I started in the industry, so I mean, I guess like a lot of guys over here, I don't know what it's like for guys over there. That you think you're going to be a sportsman. That's what you kind of have in your head, that you're going to be you're going to be a professional football player for us over here, soccer for you guys over there, or a rugby player or of some kind. So this is kind of when you realise you're nowhere near good enough for the 1% that make it as professional sportsmen. You tend to cling on to something that's at least familiar, so you can have your part in it, as it were. So when I first started out, it was an apprenticeship that I started out with when I was 16. So I mean, I pretty much walked out of school and then started this apprenticeship scheme, which was a day release at college, where I did a vocational qualification, and the rest of the time I was actually learning and working on the job. which for me, I think is the best way to do it. I think as much as it's nice to be able to do all the academic studies and the theory and everything, I think it's so much different to actually physically see it and work with the turf and actually see what inputs and the reactions you have with that and what might come out of it. So I started at a private school as part of this apprenticeship. So that's where I kind of learned the ropes, as it were. Kind of got a bit of a feel for the turf, the sports turf, and that was mainly cricket that we were working with, which is it's quite a unique sports surface to look after. It's very much more down to feel than data and kind of understanding that. So it's very much you walk the wicket and you stick your thumb in the wicket and you're thinking, oh yeah, start rolling now, or it needs a little bit more moisture in there, and
the whole new ball game.
Yeah.
We actually in New York, when I worked for the Mets, we had a tournament after the World Series, and there was this whole install, and it's just insane. Sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I know, and that kind of really, that I got the bug really bad from that. So that was just like I was really seeing the inputs and what we were trying to achieve and what we were doing, and when it got delivered and having that interaction with the players as well to kind of say, well, actually, is this meeting the standard that they're expecting it to be, and things like that, and getting a real feel for kind of how that worked. And it very much is dark art sort of stuff looking after cricket. I felt it was with everything else you can measure it, but with cricket it's very much to do with the feel and everything else. I mean, I think it's changed a little bit now, but I'm talking back in sort of 96, so it's going back a few years. So I did that. I was there for about three and a half years, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It was a great kind of introduction to sports turf and amenity horticulture in general. So there was still landscaping and tree work and things to it. So I really got a good taste of everything that the industry had to offer in that sense. And it was all on one site. So I got to get a real good feel for it. And through college, my network at college, I met a guy who said there potentially might be a job coming up at a professional football club. Soccer, I'm going to say football. You know what I mean, though.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I had the opportunity. I thought, well, I'm going to give that a go. It feels like quite a natural step to make. So we'll get it. I loved football back then, so I was only 19 at the time when I got that job, and I went there as an assistant groundsman. There was a couple of training fields and a stadium pitch, and it was a nice little setup, and I thought it was a very natural next step to make. I was there again for about 3.5 years. Again, really had an opportunity to start to maybe hone my skills a little bit, really get a good understanding of trying to work with professional sportsmen and get a bit of an understanding of the level and the standard that they're trying to achieve. So I went from assistant groundsman to grounds manager in about 3.5 years, and probably more down to circumstance rather than my own sort of like skill set. Obviously, I fit the bill in the sense of I could do it, but I mean, I was 22 when I took over. So I mean, I see 22. I mean, I'm 40 now, and I look back at 22 and I think, I was just a kid, you know. I knew nothing about everything. So I literally had like not quite a rabbit in the headlights moment. Lots of people that know me, I'm quite laid back. I'm very kind of observant, and I tend to look into a lot of stuff before I kind of headlong into it. But yeah, on the inside, there was some proper fear going on, and I thought, wow, I'm actually looking after all of this now. And so I did that for around 8 or 9 months. Again, big learning curve, working with budgets, managing people, which quite frankly is the hardest part of anything when it comes to being a manager, is actually working with people. That's the hardest thing. I say you can control every other element, you know, so, you know, there's factors there that kind of hold it. So it's with resources, finances, etc. People, I mean, it's just insane. You can be working with somebody one day, everything's all great, you're having a crack, you're working hard. They can go home, something can happen at home, you can come in the next day and it's a completely different person. So it's just like, I really had to learn quite quickly how to how to understand people.
Sounds like
and
Franco.
It's
Sounds like Franco the day after school.
I don't know what you're talking about.
but it was that for me was quite a big learning curve, just to kind of understand how people ticked and what you had to show to have value in them, and that when you worked hard, I was very much a lead by example. So I was never one of those that kind of just started laying out all the responsibilities for everybody else to kind of pick it up. I mean, if it meant I had to go and pull frost sheets on, frost covers, I'll be there at the front, I'll be doing it. So it's just like, right, we've got to get it done, let's just get it done. And then I found that was probably the best way to work, because most people just bought into the process. You're just thinking, right, let's just get this done and then we can go down the pub. So let's just go get it done. And that sort of that
most
sort of
motivating words, I'm
that's
sure,
life.
that you have, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Unless you can't drink.
Yes, Franco, it's not you.
Well, yeah. But you find your vice eventually. But yeah, so I think that was, as much as it's a managerial skill, it's a life skill, you know, being able to work with people and talk to people and communicating and things like that. It's something that you don't just, if you have it from a very young age, you tend to be quite extrovert. I think you tend to be, you don't really mind what you're saying at the time. Whereas I think if you're an introvert and you have to kind of come out your shell a little bit, it's so much more difficult to do. And I was quite an introvert. I'll be really honest with you. I don't really like people. Not if I tried to not engage with them as much.
Understandable.
So yeah, and that's just my nature. So I'm quite happy in my own company. I'm quite happy just to not socialize if I can help it. So there's elements there that you have to really kind of push those boundaries out there, especially if you're managing people. You've got no choice. You have to do it. And if they're not engaging and helping you to do the work, then the work doesn't get done. And then you get asked some serious questions from your boss why the work hasn't been done. So I guess the premise is essentially once you know what's actually at stake, you tend to make it work. You know, you make it happen. So yeah, I spent a good 3.5 years there, made it up to grounds manager, like I said, and then my boss that I actually took over at that point, he'd gone to Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. So he'd gone down there as he was looking after the stadium itself, just the stadium pitch, nothing else. And he said, look, there might be a role that might be coming up that I'd like you to go for. So we'd worked together already. We'd done 2.5 years work together. So again, anyway, we had to go through that whole process, did the interviews, and I think there was something ridiculous, like 100 applicants went for this job. And I thought, well, and interestingly for me, it was a decision made on the basis being that it was a really interesting job. Once the job was offered, just to give you a bit of a context. So I was a grounds manager at like a League 2 club, which is mid-tier, professional tier over here in England. And then obviously Tottenham Hotspur, huge club, even back then in like 2003, Premier League, right? Top of the tree, that's it. So I had to get this balance in my head, was going from League 2 to Premier League. But the flip side was going from a grounds manager and actually taking a couple of steps back and going back to being an assistant groundsman again. Financially, it actually wasn't any different. If anything, I was probably going to take a bit of a hit because I don't live anywhere near London. I would have had to, I was commuting in. So that was a decision I made. It was like, right, I'm going to have to just take the hit here because I saw it as too good an opportunity for me personally and professionally to not do. So, you know, sometimes you have to make a choice in life and it tends to like, well, actually, this is the sacrifice that I'm willing to make to see if this works or not. And it's calculated. It's not necessarily a leap of faith, but you do just have to almost take with the gut feeling, just thinking, right, I'm just going to have to give this a go. So I got off the job and I took it. So I started in December 2003, which Jesus, that's a long time ago. um,
I hear you. I don't know why, but I keep feeling like 2000s are like, yeah, they're right there. It's not that far, and it's now like 20 years. So yeah, I understand.
Honestly, I listen to some music comes on the radio, and I'm thinking, yeah, absolute banger of a tune, and then they tell me the year, and I have inside. I really cry inside. I'm
Yeah,
just
no,
like,
I
yeah,
hear you.
this is massive hit in 2005. I'm like,
No, that's not true. That's like a couple years ago. What are you talking about? There's a
oh,
playlist that
100%,
comes up
yeah.
on my phone, and it says the hits from the tens. I'm like, oh crap, it's the 20s. I didn't realize the tens are over.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, the whole context of time, 2003. Jesus. So yeah, anyway, I went down there, and again, this was the previous club. It was what was called a Fibre construction, which I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with. So it was a very early form of reinforced brute zone that we had over here in the UK. So essentially, it was a very coarse sand, and it had fibre ameliorated into it, and then but essentially it was leveled out, flattened down, and then they seeded into it. Absolutely great when you had grass on it. As soon as the grass started to wear out, the moisture management became very difficult, and it tended to fluff up and kick out, and then we had all manner of issues once we started to lose grass coverage. Moving to Tottenham Hotspur, that's when I had my first experience with the Deso Grassmaster, so a hybrid system. 2003 was 2003 was BL before lights, so we had no grow lights in 2003, and so White Hart Lane, which is Tottenham's old stadium, obviously they've built and moved into a new one since. It was actually not a big stadium in terms of its capacity. It was only 37,500 capacity. But the actual proximity and the build of the stadium, the stands were really, really close to the pitch, like really close. So essentially, I think if you could stand on any of the white lines, and I think if you leant over far enough, you could actually just touch one of the fans in the front row. So that's how close it was. Absolutely brilliant for atmosphere. Absolutely epic for atmosphere. Really, really bad for growing grass. It was probably one of the most hospitable places I've ever grown grass, and I've been in quite a few stadiums now, quite a few different climates, extreme heat, extreme cold, etc., etc. White Hart Lane was just a battle every day to keep grass coverage, to the point where it actually kind of you were getting sleepless nights trying to think, well, hold on a minute, I know I'm just going to start losing grass here. It's like inevitable. And there was nothing you could do about it before the lights came. You were literally just watching this pitch slowly deteriorate, and there was absolutely nothing you could do. If anything, you had to do less to try and maintain the grass coverage, because every time you took traffic on there, another grass blade fell off and then a plant died. It's like, wow, this is going to be a painful winter again. Fortunately, I only had to put up with that for a couple of seasons, and in 2005/6 we got our first lot of grow lights, and that made a significant difference. We tended to find our south end, for whatever reason, it never really kind of even established itself, so we tended to find it grow, and then it was trying so hard to just stay alive that it never really kind of established itself. So with the grow lights coming in, that made a big difference. 2003 went in as assistant groundsman. By 2005, I was stadium head groundsman, and then I held that role until White Lane shut in 2017. So I saw that all through that period. So it was quite a hot streak for Spurs at the time. They're always kind of regarded as the sleeping giants of football. There's going to be loads of people that might watch this and go, yeah, okay, whatever. But actually being on the inside and actually seeing how the club was run and how it was all trying to operate and what their aim was, you could see what they were trying to achieve. And through that whole period I was there, so I got there in 2003. They finished 14th. They literally just got out of relegation within about 2 months of the season finishing. And from there on out, they just slowly worked their way up the league, and to the point where they ended up with European football. So towards the end, the season started to get really congested. So we ended up having quite a lot of games. And because of the environment that it's in, there's a certain tolerance of usage it can take before it just starts to struggle. So if you were to go onto YouTube and you had a look at some of those games at White Hart Lane, and you range, and you can pretty much pinpoint the point where it's like right there. You can see where they're struggling to try and keep grass there now. And it was just one of those things. It was just such an inhospitable stadium, like I say, to grow grass in. 2017, left Spurs. So I've been there quite a significant amount of time, almost 14 years. So it was a long stint being at one place. Then I kind of took the opportunity to try and step right out of my comfort zone and thought, well, if I'm going to do it, now's the time. So in 2017, I had an opportunity to go to a small island in the Mediterranean called Malta. And they needed some help with their stadium pitch. They'd made a big investment, but from a maintenance perspective and just having that infrastructure in place, it wasn't there. So it's almost like they ran before they could walk. So I went in there as a consultant and / head groundsman, almost pretty much parachuted in to just try and get everything set up and get all the infrastructure in place for that. So I spent a good 8 months there just getting everything in place for them. So whoever came in after me had the opportunity just to pretty much pick the baton up and carry on. Really enjoyed that. That's in the transitional zone. So that was Bermuda grass. And then we switched to ryegrass once we did the international break, which is around October, November. That was a heavily used pitch. That was, so essentially that was getting used for maybe 5 times a week. And it was surprising how well that for me, that kind of opened my eyes up to warm season grasses and the capability of warm season grasses, the fact that it can be absolutely smashed to bits and recover so quickly, and it just keeps going, it just doesn't stop, it's interesting. You hear a lot of things, I study a lot, I research a lot, but when you actually physically see it and work with it, it's just completely different. That changes everything. So new appreciation for warm season grasses for me from that point onwards. And then I got an opportunity to work with it. I'd always worked with cool season grasses. So I saw that as a great opportunity for me to, again, develop some skills that I wouldn't necessarily have ever got if I'd stayed in the UK or in Northern Europe. So that was a really, really good time for me. Made some friends, still speak to them now that are working out there. And then after Malta, I had an opportunity to go become a consultant for a company called ProPitch, which is very data driven. So essentially, there's a system that they've kind of created, and it's all set with data set points and parameters. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. So essentially, there's 15 parameters that are essentially measured. This measurement then gives it a score, and then that score is essentially what's presented in a report. So it gives you, and there's parameters that they've got to work within these tests. So infiltration's one, traction is one, hardness is one, grass coverage density is another. So we go through this whole process, and they have to fall within certain parameters to be scored, and they're weighted a certain way as well. So I came in to do that, and we worked as part of a team, very small team, and we were kind of doing some serious air miles because we were pretty much international. So we were either getting parachuted into somewhere to help try and fix something, or we were helping to do tournament delivery. It wasn't very often I came in somewhere right at the very beginning and got to put all these processes in place. 9 times out of 10, you literally just came in and went, wow. Literally, it's not just a wheel's fallen off. It's normally all the wheels have fallen off and the car's on fire. So
that was rough.
Trust me, there was some. It was again. That's really kind of pushing yourself out of that comfort zone, because you're trying to pull on everything you've learned and you're trying to implement something as fast as you can to try and obviously rectify that. And it goes against a little bit trying to influence and manipulate nature in a kind of very healthy, dynamic way that you would do. It was just a case of you had to really, really quickly identify what was wrong. Inevitably, it was normally about half a dozen things. And you had to literally just prioritize, right, where do we start? What's the easiest thing to fix first? And you literally just went through the list. And if you had 2 weeks to do it, you had 2 weeks to do it. If you had 6 weeks, you had 6 weeks. So that was some of the things that we kind of had to work with. And then the other part of the job was going around and carrying out assessments that people had asked for, and whether that be through third parties that just wanted to get a bit of an idea of what that pitch was performing like. And sometimes it might be a case of if a construction company, for instance, had a pitch built and then there were some issues, i.e. from the maintenance side, then we might get asked to come in and carry out an independent assessment just to see what the actual issues were, if there were any. And on the flip side of that was tournament deliveries. So we were kind of part of the group that was awarded the contract for the Uefa finals. So Uefa Champions League final, the Women's Champions League final, the Europa League final, and a Super Cup final. So we kind of basically worked in, we got parachuted in. We got to work with the grounds team for the entire year. So as soon as it was announced which venue got it, we engaged with them straight away. And then the whole idea was that we just kind of supported and advised UEFA and the groundsman on behalf of UEFA to make sure that pitch was delivered for the finals. Again, that was a crazy time. So we had that. We had the African Nations Cup in Egypt. We kind of came in there with the idea that we were just going to help grow a pitch in, and we ended up staying and doing the whole tournament. So it was, we were thinking it was probably about 3 or 4 weeks work where we can just train the guys up. And that was a big part of what we were trying to do in terms of the ethos as a company. We weren't just going in there and just saying, right, you need to do this, you need to do that, and never giving them whys and hows and whens, just literally just kind of plow in there and do it. Whereas we were going in there, sometimes we were going in there and training staff how to best practices and things like that. So essentially they're self-sufficient. The idea is that we can walk away and they can just carry on. So it's just implementing those, our skill set and our knowledge, and impart that onto them and kind of fast track them so they can at least look after the surface that they've got. Like I say, the Nations Cup was crazy because, again, that was initially how it all had to be done. It was a very late awarding. So essentially, the African nations, they all vote who was going to have this tournament. And they'd gone and selected a country, and then they went back there to review it like a year out. And it was like, you're not going to be able to deliver this tournament, are you? So they had to cast the vote again, and Egypt was awarded it. They had 6 months to deliver this tournament. So we literally went to the Cairo National Stadium, which is the big one where the final was held. And we were helping Target, who built this, a Grassmaster. They installed one in this Cairo Stadium, and they needed help doing it. So we went in there with this one, and then it was just like, yeah, we've got a tournament to deliver. So as a support for the contractor out there in Egypt that had installed this, we trained the staff. We sat there through the entire tournament to make sure the pitch was as good as it could be. And the way it had all gone about, Bermuda was stitched in, kind of sewn into the hybrid. And it was a bit too early. It was a bit too cool. The Bermuda was like taking forever to establish, which is ironic considering we're in Egypt. I mean, it's like literally red hot for like 8-9 months of the year. It's just the time we decided to try and get Bermuda to go just too early. So we overseed it with perennial rye. And then we had to take that all the way through the summer. So we're working with perennial ryegrass, and it normally stops metabolizing. It's normally going into shutdown probably around 32, 34 at an absolute push on odd days. We tried to deliver, we delivered the pitch through a tournament. The nighttime temperatures were 34 degrees centigrade. the daytimes, the daytimes were closer to 50. So we were kind of really forcing ryegrass to do something it did not want to do. But lo and behold,
how did you end up combating it?
To be honest, I mean, I was struggling with the weather, so I mean, I don't know how the Rycross was dealing with it. I mean, what we tried to do was essentially fail-safe it. So we were using lots of syringe and irrigation to try and cool that surface down. On the flip side, we tried to do that all during the daytime, which sounds a bit ironic, really, because obviously you can have that scorch effect with it all being with that moisture sat on the surface. But because the ET rates were so high, we were finding we were doing syringing probably. We must have been doing syringing every hour and a half, and we're putting around 2.5 millimeters of water on. But I should imagine 65% of that was gone, literally within about 2 seconds. Honestly, it was just gone. So, but it was the safest way to do it. Obviously, doing any irrigation, any watering, and obviously once the sun's gone down, that it just sits on the surface. Then obviously pathogens are just going to love that. I mean, it was warm, wet. I mean, we would have just been in so much trouble if we tried to do it any other way. So, essentially, we just did the basics, 10 out of 10. That's basically what we did. I mean, we just couldn't. There was no room for mistakes. There was literally no leeway whatsoever. If something went wrong with the ryegrass, it was just game over. You'd never get something to re-establish itself during a tournament in time. So yeah, we just had to go for it. It had opening and closing ceremonies. I mean, there was giant glow-up pyramids being rolled around on it. There was a huge carpet rolled out on it, which had all the graphics and everything on. And it seemed like if everything they could do, they would do. But we ended up having to engage with the presentation team, so the guys that were going to do did all the choreography and everything for this thing. We had to engage with these guys, and we had to basically. They were thinking, right, we're going to do 2 or 3 days of rehearsals, and it's going to be 5 hours at a time. And it's just like you have to go through that whole, again, reverting way back when, with that communication and talking to people. That negotiation piece, you'd be just doing it for like, it'd be an hour or 2 hours just toing and froing and trying to get them to understand why we're saying it's not a good idea to do that. And then having your ace sleeve and just you're just kind of working it where you just say, right, I'm just going to have to call in the general manager for the stadium now. No, he was on your side and said, right, this is where we're looking at. And it's a very delicate process because everybody wants to deliver a successful tournament, and that includes the guys that want to do this opening ceremony. I mean, it's obviously a massive thing for the country. So yeah, I had to learn kind of, again, that process of just dealing with people. And again, you've got the language barrier as well. So it's kind of broken English that's coming back at you. So you just, you're getting stuff lost in translation, which was always quite interesting. So you'd be like, oh yeah, you need to do such and such. And they'd come walking in with something completely different. And you're like, I didn't even say that. I mean, what is that? I don't know what this is.
Don't even try it. Nope. Why does no one listen to the groundskeeper, huh? What's with that, you know?
Well, they do, but it takes a long, long time for them to understand. And again, it's so easy just to go into this kind of barking mode and just go, no, you can't do this. There's a reason that you just can't do it. And because it's just, you don't want to have to deal with people, but you have to. So you have to really kind of get down to, this is my thought process. This is what I think you're doing. It's also how you deliver that as well. So it's so easy just to kind of go, bang, lose your temper, and then just turn into this ranting match because they want this and that, and it just turns into this whole loggerheads thing. Whereas if you can say, right, what do you need to do? What's the sort of time that you need for it? Let's talk about it, because that's too much for this turf to be able to take it, and we need to have it ready for football. And that's the process you kind of go through. So working at pro pitch, like I say, getting taken so out of my comfort zone so many times, and you're just thinking, wow, I don't even know if I can do this. But you just do it. And you tend to find it's rather than you stand back and just go, no, I can't do this. I think sometimes you just got to step into the fire and just say, right, let's get on with it. Let's do it. So yeah, pro pitch was a crazy 15 months, traveling all over. And then I've got a young family, so I've got like 3 kids, and 15 months I worked with pro pitch. I probably spent 9 or 10 months of that actually out of the country, so I wasn't even at home. So it it was something for me that I wanted to kind of get back into. So I love sports turf. I wanted to get back into it. I wanted to be based in the UK. So we kind of went through that thought process of saying, right, we're going to be based in the UK and then we'll just deal with what comes with it. I wasn't quite expecting to be as busy as what we were and spending as much time abroad as what we were. Part of my role at ProPitch as well was helping to develop an app. Again, I know how to tap an app tile on my phone and it opens up and things happen on it. But then to be said, right, we've got to develop an app, and then actually being thrown right in the deep end, saying, right, we've got an app, we need to know what it's going to be delivered, this is the budget, let's get on with it. And it's like, wow, this is interesting. I mean, in my head, I know what I think it needs to look like.
Totally, let's do it. I'll just go whip it up real quick.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing as well. Actually, once you've seen the development of an app and how you get from somewhere to a finished product. I mean, essentially, I started at ProPitch in the May. In June, I was kind of engaging with app developers and kind of talking through the ideas and the vision of what I think it needed to look like. Essentially, I left ProPitch in August 19, so it's quite a significant bit of time, but we just about had a finished app. So we had reams and reams of to and froing. We had loads of R&D, trialing. We were just getting through the design elements, all of that sort of thing. And the app essentially is a tool to be able to collect that data. So when you're actually going out and carrying out these tests, you can literally just flick your way through this and punch the data in as you're going. And then on the flip side, once you've done and dusted that, you essentially just say, right, submit. And essentially it spits out a report. It's done, it's dusted. Part of our problem as a consultant was that we kind of had this mantra that if we were ever to do these assessments, we'd try and get a report back to them in like 24 hours. And the old way we were doing it, we had every program open in Windows, and we were just paste specialing from here to there and then taking this graphic from there. We had to pull photos in, and to do one report and have it back within 24 hours, I think we spent 4 hours doing the report. So it actually took us more time to produce a report than it did actually to do the assessment when you're actually out in the field. So yeah, that was a premise with this app. But now what we're doing now is actually that app ended up going, it's essentially going to be offered for people that want to buy kits, and they can actually do the assessments themselves, and they can punch all this data in, and essentially they can monitor the pitch through data their own way. So that was a kind of it was a nice thing to be able to deliver. And when I walked away from that, I thought, well, actually, that's I'm never going to do one again. That's just the way I look at it. It's like not necessarily. It is out of choice. I would never sign myself up again unless I absolutely had full control over it. But the whole process, I mean, it was so frustrating. I mean, I was trying to do it while I was traveling as well. So. Just to give you a quick example, I mean, I literally flew from London, UK. I flew over to Mexico City. I was working at the Azteca. They were trying to solve some problems there. So I walked straight into a cauldron of fire. Lots of things weren't quite right. Did all of that. Then I'd go back to the hotel room, and at 2 a.m. Mexico time, I'm up having a conversation with the app developer in India. He's on the following day. So I had to stay up to have a 2-hour conversation on some crucial aspects of the app, because obviously we've got deadlines to meet. And I'm up at 2 a.m. I didn't
know, sir. I will call you when I wake up.
Honestly, but I knew I wouldn't never have the time to do it. So it was really the only viable option I had. Gotcha. But I wasn't very clever the following day. Definitely not. So yeah, and then an opportunity came up at Twickenham. I mean, I flew from Cairo, finished there. I flew to Budapest in Hungary via Vienna because there wasn't a direct flight. So I left at 6 a.m. 6 a.m. in the morning. I was getting myself sorted in Cairo. Flew went to the stadium, did my final checks, said my goodbyes to the lads that are there looking after the pitch, and airport. Flew to Budapest via Vienna, Absolutely shot to bits I was. So I'd done 2 weeks straight, 12, 13-hour days. My sleep pattern was all over the place. And then I had to go into Budapest to help deliver the Women's Champions League final. I got to my hotel in Budapest at like 2 a.m. So I didn't even know. I didn't even know what day it was. I didn't even know what week it was, let alone day. Had my shower, laid on my bed, usual. I just started scrolling through the phone, and then the advert came up for the job I've got. It's one of the few jobs that I thought, if there's going to be any job that I'd go for and don't have any what ifs if I don't, it was this one. So I didn't even think twice. So I literally had my shower, checked the phone, and then I got up and opened the laptop up and I applied there and then. So at 3 a.m. in Budapest, after being up for 20 odd hours or whatever it was, I was applying for that job. That's how much of an opportunity I thought it was, that I just, let's get it done, let's get it in, before I get tied up with being busy with trying to deliver this next game, basically. So yeah, I kind of did all that, and then had a couple of interviews that went really well, obviously, and I started in September 19. Had a brilliant first 6 months. It was a World Cup year, so they host a World Cup every 4 years, and it was out in Japan in 2019. At Twickenham, they normally do the autumn internationals, which is England will play consecutive games on weekends through November. I missed that, so obviously because it was a World Cup, they were out in Japan playing, so it was quite quiet. So it was a nice introduction to the job, really get a feel for everything, and then the world went to crap, basically. So
best way to put it. Yep.
Literally did 2 Six Nations games, which was full stadium. Really 2 brilliant games. England won both of them. I thought, this is it. March the 7th was our Six Nations game. We were looking forward to delivering another domestic game. So they're going to be playing, 2 domestic teams were going to be playing in the stadium in April. But literally 2 weeks after that, it was just, the world got shut down.
It was crazy. Yeah. Our students were hired to paint so it was a soccer stadium that had a XFL. It's a different type of football, American Football League, that had just started. So we had converted MLS, so Major League Soccer, to XFL football. And then that was like 2 days after that when they said, hey, guess what? You're not allowed to leave your house anymore. It was just, it's still insane to me how it just was like a flip of the switch,
Yeah. And to be honest, there's been so many adjustments post that, and you're trying to it's so difficult because when you work in sports turf for so long, and you certainly professional sport, you're completely governed by a fixture list. You've got a calendar that you run by, so you've got your gaps. You work with your gaps. You know what you're doing, and then you can kind of set everything out. I'm a avid planner. I plan everything in terms of my work. I need to know. Yeah, exactly. I've got, obviously I'm at home now, but at work I've got like a huge whiteboard. I've got Excel sheets literally coming out my ears, and I record everything. But that's for me, so I've got that reference point to understand why something has happened. If something has happened, I can just work my way back and just go, actually, now I can see why that's happened. It's because we did this, this, and this, or it's because we didn't do this. So when that gets taken away from you, and essentially you just come to what our aim was, is that we were going to essentially have the pitch ready, that we can just slowly build it back up within 2 weeks. So when I look back on it now, how we thought anything was going to happen in the space of 2 weeks is beyond me, because here we are. We've managed to, I think we've hosted sort of like 6 games of rugby, 7 games of rugby, all of them behind closed doors, and it took us best part of 6 months before we even had a game of rugby in there. But the premise was that we were going to have the pitch ready to switch back on again within 2 weeks. So that's how we just worked through the entire summer.
And you guys have had multiple shutdowns, right?
Yeah. So we about a few weeks back, we came out of lockdown 3.0. It's been painful.
I think it would be not a good sight if there was another lockdown here in the US, but that's just, we won't get into that.
No, yeah, trust me. When everybody start questioning their governments,
No, that
let's
happened.
let's keep it light.
Ago, you know. With everything that you sort of just talked about, you had a lot of transition from different roles, and from what it sounded like, you seemed really tired. There's so much work that was in your consulting that sort of like, again, took over some aspects of your life. What was your sort of decision-making process on those transitions? Like you said, you made a step up, but at the same time, it was a couple steps back because you went from a lower level to the Premier League, and then again working your way back up through that, and then transitioning from what is probably one of the most prominent positions in, say, football in the UK to, again, I mean, I've heard it's beautiful and everything, but again, what was sort of your decision making process going from, again, such a great position to, again, out of your comfort zone? Was that just sort of something you wanted to try, something you needed to do? If you could just sort of give an explanation of how you made those decisions and what played a role in all of that.
I think most of it for me is there's two things I kind of look. Number one is obviously your gut feeling. I'm a big believer that if you're feeling it, I think you got to seriously consider it. And I was one of those that I didn't want to be one. You're kind of thinking no regrets and all the rest of it, and everything happens for a reason and all this, and destiny and all that. And I think I'm quite pragmatic when it comes to that. It's more a case of, like I say, going back to it, it's that gut feeling. Is it something that you think is going to enrich you? Is it going to, for you as a person, that you're going to develop? And that's, like I say, as much as it's professional, it's personal as well. Some decisions are based on the family. So, I mean, I kind of feel like I need to do something different and better for them. I mean, also as well, I think you can be in your comfort zone and you can get comfortable. So within it, and I think sometimes you can get quite insular. So it's you kind of get quite a narrow focus point to the point where you're not seeing anything. You've gone and focused that hard that you're literally just looking through this tiny slit, and it's just like hyper focused. And sometimes you need to know when you need to take some steps back just to try and broaden your view again. And for me, from a work perspective, I had to have something that was going to challenge me, and not only that, but it had to enrich me. So it's nice. I'm a workaholic, so I mean, I will work 100-hour weeks. Won't even think twice about it. I'll just do it, and it's because it needs to be done, and I want it to be done, so I'll do it. And it's that drive as well. And I'm thinking, well, I need to have that kind of going. And if that means I've got to do 16-hour day, then I'm doing a 16-hour day. And if that means that's going to make my tomorrow a bit easier, then I'm going to do that tomorrow. So it is one of those. By my very nature, I'm a workaholic. So when I kind of say, yeah, I was consulting and I was flying here, I was doing that, and I was tired, and I did it all with a smile on my face, you know. So I mean, it might sound like that was kind of really hard. It sounds like it's really busy. For a lot of people that is, but for me, I just get smashed into things. I don't really one of those that kind of think, is there an easier way to do something? And it's not. It's just, for me, my ethic is, everybody says, if you work hard, you get lucky. That's crap. It really isn't. You work hard, you get recognition. That's the difference. Then when you get recognized, then you get rewarded. That's the way you've got to look at it. Luck doesn't come into it. Luck is if before you step out, you don't get hit by a bloody car. That's luck. But if you've got the drive and you work hard, you get your recognition. If you get your recognition, you get rewarded. And then with that's how you've got to look at it. And I think if you're thinking, well, something's going to turn for me, I'm going to get a bit of luck, I'm getting an opportunity. Yeah, okay, you are going to get opportunities, but those opportunities come your way because you've worked hard for it, not because God's looking down on you and he's giving you a good hand. You know, it's just like you make your own life, and I think that's the way I've always looked at it. Is that I've worked hard, and if I see there's an opportunity for me to go somewhere else and develop and challenge myself and still continue to enjoy what I'm doing, which is ultimately it is. Hence why I like doing the hours I do. It's because I enjoy it. It's not. Yeah, okay, I get home and I'm absolutely shot to bits, and I'm sat there drinking a rum and coke, and I'm not like thinking, yeah, that was. But I'm happy because I know I've worked hard. And I've done a good job. So that's a job satisfaction. You don't get that. You don't get that in many jobs, where you can work hard and you can physically see the results from. Sports turf is one of the few where you can really put a lot of effort in and you can see the results. It's tangible, It's not like shifting a load of emails saying, "Wow, I've cleared half my email inbox today." It's like, yeah, no thanks, not for me. I need to physically see that, and that's the drive as well. I think it is a case of just working hard, and if anybody thinks you're going to get somewhere in life by ducking and diving, you will to an extent, but you won't get where you want to be. And if you do get where you want to be, you'll get found out.
Some of our students who have graduated from our program and are currently attending a university studying turfgrass management want to take what they're learning and travel the world and work at different fields and golf courses worldwide. Can you talk about your experiences of traveling the globe and working on these different turfgrass fields and discussing turfgrass with those different cultural backgrounds and practices for each different pitch?
Yeah, so in terms of the traveling and things like that, it sounds really romantic, but it's a means to an end. You need to get there, so jump on the damn plane and get there, right? So I think
I thought it was like a movie where they just like showed up and they were there,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, everybody knows international travel. I mean, airports sorting out visas, and you tend to be traveling heavy as well. So I've got assessment tools that I'm taking with me. So I've essentially got 2 massive heavy cases. And then you spend 8 hours on a plane with a crying baby behind you. I mean, I'll be really honest with you, it's not exactly fun. But
sounds like a dream. I mean, crying babies and everything.
I kind of, the way I look at it is that I see it as being an opportunity to go somewhere else. I'm traveling to another part of the world. I've been asked to go in there to help advise, and I've been in there to go and do a job. I think the bottom line is that you just take everything you've learned, your ethic, how you approach sports turf, and you've got to very quickly assess what you're walking into. I think it's really important to build that communication really early, so they get a feel for how you work, how you are as a person, what those expectations are. I mean, ultimately, they've got to buy into the vision, so that you're there to try and recover something. You've gone in there to try and assist and help and improve their surface. And sometimes you can go into places and you're turf god. So you've got to go in there. You're the all-seeing eye. You know everything about turf, and you have to deliver. So whatever you say, they'll do, right? And they're the good jobs. They're the good ones. The bad ones are where they've had 3 consultants going before you. It's still not right, and before you've even walked into a venue, you're automatically going to be seen with a suspicious eye. So where I always go back, where I think for anybody that's kind of wanting to really get a good idea of some of the life skills you need to get, 100% communication is key. You need to learn how to communicate. And I have to learn really quickly how to build relationships, gain their trust that what I'm going to ask them to do is going to help. And then again, same principle, lead by example. I don't just stand there and say, yeah, this is what needs to be done, and then put my arms folded. If I've got an opportunity to show somebody how I would do it, I would then go out to do it, so then they understand the process. And then it's like, well, when I leave, they can do it. So they understand from start to finish how to put a fertilizer application down on the pitch. They might have never done it before. If they have done it, they might not necessarily done it the right way. So yeah, I kind of thinking when you kind of drop into these places, it's a cauldron, and you've got to read the situation really quickly. And I think if you get an opportunity to go and base yourself somewhere and spend, because from my perspective, they were really, really short stints. Certainly when it comes to sports stuff, you don't get to really kind of get a feel for the weather in its entirety. You don't really get a feel to build relationships with the team that are working there. We are coming in, we are going to hold their hand, we're going to support them, we're going to advise them, we're going to impart knowledge and experience, but we have to do it in such a short space of time. So everything's all fast. So we're not just kind of getting a bit, whereas you could go into a new job and you've got a bit of time just to kind of take that all in. You've got like, well, I've got a month to get a good idea of what this pitch does, how it works, how the team work. I can really kind of just take my time. When you go into some of these places, I was literally just going in, and I might only be there for 2 weeks. So I've got like 2 days to learn how to speak some language, which I can't even speak the English language, let alone kind of pick up Spanish or Egyptian.
I've obviously proven I can't speak English tonight.
So language barrier isn't always an issue. I must admit, I spent most of my time on Google Translate. And to be honest, that was even worse at some points. I mean, Google Translate, I mean, Jesus, there was some bad mistranslations on that. I mean, I put something in that I thought, I don't know what it spat out the other end, but the guy looked at me like he wanted to kill me. So I don't know what Google Translate decided to put in as a different word, but it didn't go down too well. So sign language, really rudimentary sign language. And above all, you have to have a sense of humour. So you have to smile, you have to crack the jokes. Groundsmen and greenkeepers and groundskeepers all across the world, they always have a sense of humour because it's just the very nature in which they're working in. So it's very easy to kind of build that rapport up nice and easy. And there's lots of banter. There's lots of taking the piss. You just to kind of build that rapport. And that's all part of that trust thing. So it's like, yeah, you can start having the jokes are on me. Fine. Yeah, I'm going to hold my hands up and laugh with you, whatever. And you kind of just take that. So the guy I was working with Pro Pitch, he'd go in there and actually just give everybody nicknames, whether they liked it or not. They got a nickname, and it got to the point where he'd go in there. He'd only been somewhere for like 2 or 3 weeks, but everybody were all calling each other by those nicknames by the end of it. So, but I say we were in Mexico, and there's one guy who looked like Diego Maradona, so he was just called Diego. And by the end of it, everybody was calling him Diego, even though his name was like Manuel or something. It's just like absolutely, but it's nice. It breaks the ice. So yeah, you've got to learn all these kind of skill sets when you're going around there. With regards to the turf, I mean, you can be walking into anything. So like I said, I think looking after turf exceptionally well, the basics, proper 10 out of 10, just really get, you know what turf needs, you know what turf is going to do to respond and perform. That's what you aim for. That's what you concentrate on, because you haven't got time to start thinking, well, we could maybe think about maybe changing the water quality because that's having an impact. It doesn't matter. There's water available. That's what you're using. So you have to really just get right back down to basics and say, right, the resources and start, right, we've got this fertilizer. We've got it off an Egyptian farmer that he uses to grow sort of like fruit with. And you're like, well, no, I mean, obviously that's not going to be great for sports turf, but if you're telling me that's all that's available right now, we're going to use it, and it's going to be, we'll have to work at application rates and everything else afterwards. Let's just get something, let's get going. So yeah, you very much have to think on your feet. Whereas I think if you're doing an internship or you're dropping in somewhere, I think ultimately you've just got to immerse yourself with whatever country you're in, the culture, go out, go and see things, and get and show some appreciation and understanding of the country that you're in. I think that's really important. So, like I say, for me, working in Egypt, I did some work out in the UAE as well as part of Club World Cup, an Asia Cup sort of tournament delivery. And again, it's obviously devout Muslim countries for the best part. So you need to understand that. I mean, I was in Egypt and they were practicing Ramadan. So I couldn't go in and have this expectation that the guys were going to work during the day when they're fasting. So what we ended up doing is that I'd catch up with them in the morning while they're completely kind of out of it, because they're absolutely high on whatever they've eaten all overnight and everything else, because with the sun down and everything. But during the day, I'd let them just rest, sleep, because obviously they don't want to do anything because they can't eat, which is what most people want to do during the day. So what we ended up doing, and I did it with them, we'd end up working at night. So as soon as the sun had gone down, they'd have their big meal. It's like, right, they're ready to go. So we worked from like 9 p.m. till sort of like 4 a.m. So we were just essentially doing night shifts. And that's what I mean about kind of just putting yourself in the culture. Don't put it all on them that they need to work how you work. You're going into their country, you're going into their environment, you're going into their venue, you adapt to them. And then within that, you're kind of passing on your knowledge and experience and helping them get set up and everything else, but throw yourself into it. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't eat in front of them. I wouldn't drink in front of them during the day, knowing that they're practicing Ramadan. So it's things like that you just kind of just got to be very open to doing, rather than just kind of thinking, well, I don't do that in my country, so I'm not going to do it while I'm in yours. You won't get liked. and it'll be very difficult to kind of build any relationships past that if you're going to start going down those sort of roads. So I think it's very good to try and just integrate yourself in and become part of the team ultimately. You might be leading them, but you need to just kind of build yourself into that one in terms of the relationships. Really important.
I love that. That's awesome how you did that, and taking those things into consideration probably means the world to them. So it's definitely awesome. I do want to sort of shift focus to your current position where you're working now, the grass you're taking care of. We sort of already discussed this. Rugby's a different animal. Scrums, everything that goes into it. Again, if I was out there, I'm a large man, I'd still get run over. What is it that you're paying attention to closely during a game, preparing for what you're going to do post game in the next few days, preparing for that next match that you have, if that's the right word for it? I apologize.
Yeah. So in terms of the game itself, the surface is dry, but obviously the ball's being handled, so there's no need, unless obviously the good old British weather decides to throw its oar in, which it generally does. But our aim is to have the surface dry.
Just happened here 5 minutes ago, poured out of nowhere. So
we tend to cut around 30 millimeters, so it's not particularly long considering the actual surface itself. Ultimately, my aim is traction for the players. They need to be able to have confidence in the surface that if they decide they want to change direction, they can change direction. The obviously aim is that I'm sure they don't want to get smashed with a tackle. If they decide to slip, then they're going to get hit hard. So traction in terms of the backs to be able to change direction quite quickly. Traction again for the forwards, same principle. They're going to be scrummaging and mauling, so there's a lot of work on the ground. But the players need to be able to have that confidence in the surface. So our aim is, from a turf perspective, is we're trying to keep the turf healthy ultimately. It tends to look after itself. It's being looked after well. We give it all the right inputs at the right time. Little things that we try and do is try and gear up. When we aerate, for instance, we won't do it any closer than 10 days out from a game, purely because we just relieve some of that hard firmness that might necessarily be there, do the gas exchange, and then we'll actually start to bed down and firm that back down again prior to the game. We tend to find that actually the pitch doesn't perform particularly well if it's, say, for instance, we clegg hammer. If the gravities are sort of like mid-80s and below, we know the pitch is not going to perform particularly well. So it will tend to move, cut up. Traction will be there, obviously, because of the fibre. But we just tend to find, from our perspective, for us to be able to get a pitch repaired quickly, we can't do that if it's sort of like below that sort of number. So we normally tend to go for sort of 85 plus, and we can probably top out about maybe 100, maybe 105, depending on the conditions. That still allows them for their cleats to still get contact with the soil. And then what we do as well is we kind of put a bit of a conditioning spray application down. So we use calcium nitrate, magnesium. We use potassium silicate as well. And the idea is just to kind of get the leaf turgid. So it's actually quite stiff and hard. It pulls some of the moisture out of the leaf as well. So it's less likely to have sort of that tears, that fraction tears. Because what we tend to find is if it gets clipped at the crown on right, it takes so much longer for it to come back. So the idea is that we don't get any hemorrhaging of the actual leaf itself. Yeah, it gets flattened down, but we can brush it and stand it all back up again and it's good as gold. Whereas if we don't start having those inputs in there and it's got a bit too much moisture in the leaf, we tend to find it just plays a bit differently. It tends to cut up a bit more. We tend to lose more grass coverage because we're physically losing grass leaf. During the game itself, I tend to count the scrums. We try to work out where those scrums have been. So at half time, we get an opportunity to go out there and do any pitch repairs. So it's normally a good idea to try and keep tabs on where those scrums have taken place. So we can obviously just get straight out there and repair those as quickly as we can. And then post-match, like a lot of guys over here do in the UK, I'm not too sure how it works for you guys over there, but we tend to get obviously debris from the pitch. And because it's a hybrid pitch, we don't want to have too much organic matter build up on the top because characteristically infiltration rates slow down. Because it's sand based, it hasn't got any microbes or anything in there to kind of break that organic matter down, so it just builds up. So we have to physically try and remove that before it gets to move down into below the canopy and actually onto the surface. So we use just small pedestrian mowers, only 22-inch Honda mowers essentially. We have brushes fitted onto the front of them, so we essentially groom the surface, flick all the debris up and suck it up and remove it off the surface. And we can remove anything up to, depending on conditions, we can remove anything between maybe a cube or 2 cube of clippings off the surface after each use. And that's just debris that if we didn't, that'd just break down and go into the surface. Like I say, it'll start to impede infiltration, and then we're in all sorts of bother later on in the season. And then sometimes we might apply a post-recovery spray, which tends to be more, we aim for like carbohydrates, just simple sugars, just to get into the leaf. It just speeds that recovery process up. We've got 10 grow lights, so they'll get put out onto the field. Again, it's an 82,000 seat stadium, so it's quite a high stadium, so we tend to have quite a few shade issues anyway, so the lights are used for that. But again, that process is just trying to speed that recovery up so we can kind of get that pitch into as good a condition as we can before its next usage.
And again, with everything with that, that's definitely something to be worried about. With the debris and everything you're talking about, what cultural practices are you focusing on, particularly during the season? And then outside of the season, you're obviously aerating, you talked about. Are you seeding? Is there any top dressing, anything along those lines that you're focusing on in season versus out of season? Maybe sort of like a renovation type thing that you can do in-house without, again, taking the deso out or anything like that.
Yeah. So the Deso Grassmaster, the construction itself, it's kind of guaranteed for 10 years. So essentially, once that construction has been built, as long as it's maintained and is renovated each closed season, that should do a decade, basically. So what we do in the season, my main aim essentially is lots of grooming. So we tend to disturb the surface a lot, even potentially if we've had games on there. So we'd rake the surface, we'd just try and get all that grass stood back up again. I'm not a huge advocate for keeping patterns in all the time. I'd rather have the grass standing up, and aesthetically might not look brilliant, but in terms of its health, it's all stood upright. So we'll do lots of reverse mowing. So we'll essentially try and get all the nap of the grass stood back upright. We top dress. We aim to top dress every sort of like 4 to 6 weeks, and again, that's just to kind of keep the surface fresh and keep the crown clean. Make sure there's lots of air movement around there. Try and stop the algae building up. Again, we tend to find that's quite a nice vehicle for pathogens to move around. So if we keep disturbing that surface and don't let it build up, we kind of stop that environment being created from that organic matter. And we'll do that right through the season. In terms of frequency, every 4 to 6 weeks we'll top dress. Aeration wise, it'll be as and when. Invariably, it depends. If we've got an excessive amount of games, we won't get an opportunity to do it. We'll probably do a deep 30 drain. So we'll probably aim to sort of punch down to maybe 6 inches or so. But generally, we use a Procore, the idiot proof, one of the best machines ever created by man for sports turf.
We just ordered one. We're excited.
Oh.
Hopefully my idiots don't prove it wrong to not be idiot proof. I love you guys. I'm
pretty good at that. That whole making sure it's idiot proof.
100%. I can guarantee I'm an idiot and I can operate with you'd be fine. So we aerate probably. The aim is every 4 to 6 weeks, fairly similar. But if we've got an intensive amount of games, we normally have to sit on it, and then we'll just do a deeper aeration post those sets of games. And then what we tend to do, we have our season runs pretty much from August, depending on what we've got games wise. And we'll have international fixtures, domestic fixtures. We've got some sponsors days, so they get, as part of the contractual rights, they get to have access to the pitch. So we're very similar to Carl at Wembley in that sense that we get lots of sponsors that get days on the pitch. So we'll go all the way through Six Nations through February and March. April we'll slip back in and have some more domestic games, and then we go right through to Premiership final, which is the final of the domestic league in England. Then I haven't experienced it yet, but normally there's concerts straight after that. So as soon as they've finished that, we'll have a concert season, which is quite restricted at Twickenham purely because of the licensing laws in the area. So they'll have a few concerts. Then after that is close season renovations, which if you check my Twitter, you can see that we've just done one, which again, the pandemic's just put us all out of sync massively. So we've had to done 2 renovations in the space of like 6 months. It's ridiculous.
So you kind of discussed what your aeration patterns and stuff like that are for your yearly basis. Could you discuss your day-to-day operations for you and your maintenance team?
So I mean, we tend to, if we're looking at 15 degrees plus in the UK, we're probably cutting every day. In terms of our maintenance schedule from a day to day, we've got the main stadium pitch. Outside of that, we've got 12 acres, and there's all kinds of things. We've got an area which is like a rehab area, which is just outside the stadium. That's maintained by us. We've got lots of hard landscaping that all needs to be maintained by us. I've got an advisory sort of role as well with regards to some of the areas that England Rugby train at. So there's a training facility just outside of London that I go and help out and advise and consult and help those guys out down there. Same principle, we've got another area which is actually in London, not too far away from the stadium itself. Again, just as an advisor, really just to help out as and when needs be there. And then we've got a scheme that we work, a program. It's called Rugby Grounds Connected, and that's to help all the grassroots clubs to raise the standard of their pitches. So we're again, as an advisory basis, we're just trying to look to evolve that now. But same principle, we're there to kind of impart knowledge and kind of things like that. So I do quite a few webinars. We tend to do sort of like one big webinar every sort of like 6 weeks or so. again, just to kind of go through the process of understanding sports turf basics. And obviously these guys are just volunteers. I mean, they were probably an accountant in their past life before they retired. So they're like 60 and it's like, well, what can I do to kind of keep busy? And they tend to volunteer. So obviously these guys just go, yeah, I'll look after the pitch, and then obviously don't know what the hell they're doing. So we kind of, we've tried to just reach out to these guys, especially during the pandemic. Obviously it'd be nice to be able to go around to some of these clubs and see these guys, but that's obviously not an option at the moment over here. So again, it was the easiest way for us to share knowledge and content that way. So yeah, that invariably, that's quite a regular thing that I'm doing. And in terms of stuff, the day-to-day stuff's slightly different. I think if you look at it from a week basis, so we tend to feed quite frequently, but in quite small amounts. So I try and only give the pitch what I know it's going to need to be kind of healthy and be able to do everything we need it to do. So we tend to layer our nutrition, so it has like an organic and a mineral fertilizer, two separate products, but they'll be applied at the same time. So we'll just lay one down and then we'll lay one straight over the top, so it gets the best of kind of both worlds. And then our spray nutrition, that's kind of a right mixed bag. So we have got a program, but because I've got to know the product so well, depending on that clip rate and how much we're physically taking off, I will adapt the end input from that. So I won't just go, right, we're going to put 20 litres of this on. I want 20 kg of that going on every 2 weeks in terms of end input. Essentially, I'll measure how much we're clipping off every day, and then I'll decide how much end we're going to put on that. So I like to try and be quite efficient in my approach with that. I don't like just putting it on there because I think it needs it. I'd just rather put it on there because it needs it. And again, I'm quite data driven, so that's all my sort. I was to a degree before Pro Pitch, but Pro Pitch really kind of rammed it home. Really how important it is to kind of collect data, collate it, and then get a better understanding of what you're doing to the pitch, what the usage is doing to the pitch, and actually try to get better by understanding what it is. I think it's so easy just to think, right, if I do this, and this, it's going to do that, and that. And I said, yeah, it will do. Like I say, I think the basics of turf, 85% you can get there quite easy, actually, if you do it really well. Once you get to the elite level, we're chasing the rest. So we're fine-tuning everything to gain ourselves a 0.5%. We'll take a product out and put a product in to lose 0.5%. And we're forever tinkering. We're never generally very happy either, most of the time. It's a bit of a curse, really.
Yeah. And like you were saying just a second ago, with tinkering, trying to gain that edge, sometimes that's through technology. And you sort of talked about it before, the whole BL era. I laughed at that a little bit. I was like, look at that. We have a whole new AD system. Look at that, you know?
Yeah.
So artificial lighting has become a huge thing, especially in the UK. I think Carl said it best. He said it's shaped like a shoebox. Every stadium, you got the nice little, not really any space for you to grow grass the best possible way. Has there been any other technological advancements that you have seen that you have brought in and implemented to your pitch? Even you discussing your app and how there are different things that you can use to measure different aspects of your turf grass. What have you used through the years, and what have you seen recently come out that you would like to implement to get that edge that you're talking about?
So yeah, I mean, barring the absolute obvious, which is the grow lights, which for us in the Northern Hemisphere, where our winter days are so short, I mean, my stadium pitch, for instance, if it does happen to be clear and sunny in winter, which never happens in the UK, it's miserable. It's a horrible place to be in the winter. It's overcast, tends to be raining, and it's about 8 degrees. So I call it blah weather. So it's not really doing a great deal of anything, really. So we kind of, the grow lights have been very, very significant in terms of us being able to produce surfaces that we want to produce. I think really regards to maybe not necessarily technology, but I think the industry's approach over here to how we innovate and get better. I think there's been some very, very good relationships built between suppliers, between manufacturers, between companies that want to provide what we want. And I think also our approach to our work as well. We don't. Whereas years ago, we'd just be like, right, there's a spring, summer fertilizer, there's an autumn, winter fertilizer. And if you want something else, we can maybe get something with a bit of iron in it. And you're like, that's what we've got. So that's all we had to work with. There was no other options. Whereas now we've kind of steered and demanded more from those suppliers. And over the last 10 years, I wouldn't say we're completely flooded, but the focus on delivering and producing quality products for us to use, I think, has changed exponentially. So reverting back to what I was saying, where we're coming down to that tinkering and the fine tuning, we can fine tune so much now, almost to the point where you can probably get lost in that a little bit, but it's not a bad thing. I think the fact is that you can all of a sudden say, well, actually, if I just take that 5 litres of that out and I replace it with 10 litres of this, that's going to tick more of my boxes, but on this particular spray. And then you can revert back and change things back out. Don't think that there's that magic formula. Just think, well, I'll just spray this every week and it's going to be great. Because it won't be, because inevitably the weather will change, and whatever you put in there, for instance, it might be a urea based, and then obviously the temperatures start to drop away and you're like, well, hold on, why isn't it working like it was in July? Here we are in December and it doesn't work. Why is that? So yeah, I think for me, I think that suite of products that are now available to the industry is something special. And I think that's really helped us to deliver what we want. And I think as much as it's a reaction from the companies by our attitude towards our work. So if we're saying, right, a company comes in and says, yeah, we've got this product, I think it's going to be really good for you. Like, well, actually, that's not what I want. Companies now will go away and they'll make something bespoke. So they won't just go, well, sorry, this is all we've got on the shelf and that's all you can have. Well, if that's the case, then you're not going to last long in this industry. So time to take a walk and go somewhere else. And that's, like I say, that's a good thing for the industry. We're kind of pushing that now. So, yeah, I think for me, that's the biggest thing. There's some nice things coming along in the pipeline that I think maybe in the next 3 or 4 years will be big game changers. But whether we're kind of there now, probably not. There's a few elements of the technology that's not quite sharp enough for it to be used. Or put into the application that you want it to be put into. But I think some of these things, if they do come about, will be big game changers, But like I say, it's going to be completely dependent on the companies that are doing the R&D and the field trials. And like I say, there's a long way to go in that respect. But yeah, I think we're there. I mean, ultimately, you just want to be better and get better. And I think as long as you've got companies and people in the industry that want to do that with you, then it's only a good thing.
Awesome. That's incredible. I think you touched base a little bit on this. Again, where you're at with your facility and being the top of the top when it comes to rugby in such an iconic place, there are high standards that are expected of you from the facility, from the owners and all the different groups that work with you. And you sort of spoke to it during your consulting days. What is it that you're doing to ensure that your crew and your members of your team are meeting that standard? Like you said, you're a hands-on type of guy. You like to be leading by example, which again, I think is huge. And I try my best to do that every day with my kids. What are you doing to ensure that their work is meeting that high standard that you expect, and that is just, again, sort of the norm of what is in your stadium?
So interestingly, I'm in quite a unique situation with my team, the work with me at Twickenham. So there's only 3 of us that at the moment that look into it. I've just actually had sign off for a 4th person, which we're looking to recruit in September. But interestingly, my deputy, he's 50, and my assistant, he's 60. So these guys have got serious amounts of experience. So, yeah, absolutely. And they've got a wealth of it. They know the venue inside out. They've known everything that's happened over the past. I mean, even taking into account their ages, they've been there respectively like 23 and 22 years. So they've been there a seriously long time. So for me, that's like a whole hive of information, a whole load of experience that I can kind of call on and utilize for us as a team to get better. So if I can understand something, why does that do that? Especially when you come into a new job and you come to a new venue, you've got a good understanding of, like I say, the basics, the core skills that you need to deliver a good service, but you need to know the past and the background. And then sometimes you need to identify and ask the right questions at the right time. But the fact that you've got somebody there that's been there for so long, you can basically just say, "Oh, do you know what? Why do they do it like this?" And they'll be able to give me the reasons behind why something's like that. And then within that, I can assess and say, well, can we change it? Or should it be changed? Or I can see why they haven't changed it. So it's given me that ability to be able to assess the situation more. So from that respect, I've got loads of respect for these guys that have been doing it so long and have been looking after this stadium pitch for such a long period of time. Really, really good guys. I really get on them really well. But in terms of like when I came into the role, obviously predominantly came from football. So and Premier League, and everything is right at the sharp ends. You string line out everything. So even when you're mowing, string lines are down so they're pin sharp. When you're putting your markings out, everything's all strings. You want everything to be pinpoint sharp. You measure everything 8 times and then mark it out once. You go through all this process. So you're right at a really, 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 really high level. In rugby, it's a slightly different culture. So they're still delivering good services, but their approach to it is because of the culture of the sport and how it's approached. And it's like, well, rugby players don't really expect much. They expect to be diving around in mud bars, et cetera, et cetera. And I think some of that mentality is still there. So I kind of think, well, no, let's not do that. Let's say, right, let's make Twickenham the best rugby union pitch in the world. Why not? There's no reasons why not. It's essentially, the resources are available. We know what we're doing. It's all of us about just being able to sharpen everything up. So let's do that. So like I say, when I first started there, it's quite a quiet period. The team were over in Japan, so the stadium itself was fairly quiet. We had a few things going on just to kind of keep us ticking along, but in terms of big events, it was quite quiet. So I had the option then to say, right, I could get a really good feel. So, I mean, the pair of them must have felt like they were on mastermind because I was grilling them every day about everything. If I saw something, like, oh, okay, so we've got that. Why do we do that? So trying to digest and bring all this information in. And then once you've got that, you can reflect and say, right, okay, I get why you do it like that. But I think if we try and do it this way, and again, I'm going to revert all the way back again, it's that ability to be able to communicate and communicate effectively as well. Not just do it because, oh, I'm going to tell you how to do this. This is how we're going to do it. Bang, full stop. If you've got to that level, something's gone wrong. I think if you can get to that point where you're saying, right, from my point of view, this is how I like to see it. I think it'd be great if we can kind of do it this way. I think it really raise the standard. Small changes, and some people are like, well, it's a small change. It's not going to make any difference. I was like, well, how do you know? How do you know? Let's make the small change and see if it changes. And if it doesn't make a change, you're like, okay, you're right. I was wrong. That didn't make. Can it? Let's try something else. But it's just you're trying to get these guys into that way of thinking. So it gets to a point where they're thinking, oh, okay, now I've got an understanding of what the expectations are here. And it helps them to kind of engage in a slightly different way. So yeah, to have that opportunity to be able to kind of work with these guys and them helping me out massively with regards to, like I said, their experience of the venue, their experiences, even life skills. I mean, like I said, my deputy's 10 years older than me, but my assistant's 20 years older than me, so they've got vast amounts more experience than I have just with regards to life. So even just some of the general stuff I can ask, and they've probably likely it is they've done it and got it right or got it wrong, and can kind of give me a bit of a go, give me a nudge in the right direction. So it's like I say, slightly unique situation with regards to the demographic of my team, but with regards to our approach to work, it's no different to any other team. That you want to deliver the best service you can, so you do what you need to do to deliver that service and maintain it as such.
You kind of talked about how you're trying to deliver the best rugby pitch that you can. With the long hours, intense labor that comes with the turf grass management, how do you motivate and ensure that you're getting the best out of your crew with the managing of the pitch?
Again, leading by example is always the key. So I don't put any expectations on everybody else to work hours like I work. But when the hours do need to be worked, they know that there's an expectation that they're going to have to deliver those hours. So I'm very conscious of the fact that everybody's got lives outside of work. I've got a life outside of work. My choice is that I want to deliver really good, because my outside of work won't be any good. That quality won't be there because I know I hadn't have delivered on the day. So it's that again, my approach to work. Now, everybody's different. Like I say, working all the way back when I was mentioned it, managing people is so difficult because everybody's different. Nobody's going to have the same vision as you. Nobody's going to have the same thought process as you. And it's just aligning all those sort of things with regards to how you want that vision to look and deliver it. I mean, I think it's so easy just to, like I say, you could just go in and say, right, this is a job, and now I've made it. And it's like, well, yeah, it's great, but you're not challenging yourself. It's just like you got to the top of the tree, but you still got to be able to kind of reach for the stars. You just got to keep going and delivering that pitch. And for me, I think groundsmen, groundkeepers, successful ones around the world, they know what they have to do, and it is a laborious job. It does take hours of work to deliver those services, and you can't get away from that. So I think you go into this industry knowing that that's what's required, so you do it. At the end of the day, most people have been filled out fairly early on when they've realised, oh, hold on a minute, I've just done a 70-hour week and you're telling me I've got to do the same next week because we've got another event to get ready for. It's like, yep. It's like, right, it's not for me. It's like, right, okay. And that's just how it's just filtered down that way. So that I think it's, as much as it's trying to motivate staff to deliver, you wouldn't be there unless you knew that's what you had to do. So I think it's, don't get me wrong, everybody has their bad days. Nobody rocks out of bed with a smile on their face and ready to rock and roll every day, Monday to Friday. It's just, that's not how it works. But on the flip side of that, when you get into work, you've got to put your game face on. You've got to help your team to deliver that pitch on that day. And you do it. You just get into it, and it's not only that though, but it's for your teammates to recognise that you're having a bad day, and to help you. So I think as much as it's to do that, and I had this thing that when I was back at Spurs, and this kind of culture that I tried to kind of bring in, and it's like the brotherhood. So we all treat each other like brothers. So when you spend more time with your crew than you do with your family, you treat them like brothers, and you have the jokes, you have the laughs. But that's Monday to Friday. But as soon as you know you've got a game day on, everybody switches it back. It's professional. Let's get this delivered. Let's get it done. And then once you've delivered it, you get back to the laughs and the jokes and a bit of banter. And like I say, that's the only way you kind of get through those periods where it's really hard work. You need to have people that understand that job is hard. There's no two ways about it. And once you understand that it's a hard job and you accept it for what it is, I think that's half the battle. Some people just don't quite get it. It's just like, wow, hold on a minute, I've just done 70 hours. You're telling me it's going to be the same again next week? It's like, when do I get off? It's like, no, that's not how it works. If it's just something not for you, you go and do. You go and try something else. I think it's as simple as that.
Absolutely. We worked a concert in Pittsburgh. I worked for both the football team and the baseball team. Their stadiums right next to each other. One concert one night, the next night a concert at the other stadium, and it was a long, let's say 32 hours, I think, that I working both events. But I completely understand. Sort of to segue into the next question, you sort of discussed it a little bit with the venue size and everything. You do have concerts and you have that concert season.
Yeah.
With that, concerts, I don't know how they became such a big part of the industry and such a big part of what sports turf managers do. What are you doing to ensure that the impossible environment that it puts for the turf grass to thrive? I mean, it shuts everything off from it with the flooring and everything. What are you doing to ensure that, again, your pitch is doing okay and gets through that short period of time where you stress it out to the point where, again, you have those sleepless nights of, oh man, I need to get this flooring off. I need to get everything out of here so I can start growing the grass again. What are you doing to ensure that it's healthy coming out on the back end of a concert?
So this is, I mean, for us in the UK, it's a bit different because the weather's so crap most of the year. Our concert window is so small. I mean, essentially it's just the summer. And invariably what, in terms of a business model, what everybody tries to do is everybody's pitching for artists to come to their venues and have their concerts. But we try to finish that it's always going to be right at the very beginning of our close season. So we essentially have completed our playing season. Then we essentially, we've sprayed a pitch with a glyphosate. Then the flooring goes down. Then they host their concerts. They get a good crack at that. And again, that's that model proposal. I mean, you accept there potentially could be a challenge if you were to do something mid-season, but they need to understand the consequences and the costs of that. And 9 times out of 10, once you've actually factored in that profit margin that you would have made of hosting that concert, you've lost most of it by repairing your pitch. So essentially it is almost talk yourself out of hosting the concert in the first place. So we essentially what they do is that we'll spray off a glyphosate, they'll have their concerts, however many nights there are. Once the flooring's lifted, we will essentially begin our close season renovations. So we strip it all off and then we'll just grow it all back in, fresh pitch, ready for the new playing season.
That's awesome because it's definitely something crazy. I remember putting it down. I was like, this is not okay. I'm freaking out and I'm not in charge of anything. So no, that's great. Cause again, we in Pittsburgh, we did, we had removed the sod and we put nothing down. It was just the sand profile underneath it. And we put it in Beyonce's contract. She had to pay for the field. So it worked out just fine.
Yeah, I'm sure she's not shy of a few dollars, right?
I'd say not.
Yeah, still working though. Money makes money. But yeah, no, I think that again, it's all down to that business model. If the business model makes sense, then yeah, you take that hit, and then again, you just get the opportunity to repair post that. But I think realistically, if you can make it work, that you're not compromising that surface to the point where it's not actually ready for its primary objective, then anybody that's running that venue is not doing their job properly. So don't get me wrong, you've got to maximize revenue. You want to make as much money as you possibly can. But why would you do that and have the potential to have a negative impact on your most expensive assets, which are the players that are going to be taking the field? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And again, like I say, in terms of the UK, I think the business model just about works. I know Carl at Wembley's is a bit more difficult for him with regards to how they do that, but by and large, they try and actually make sure that when they're not using it for sport, they have a block that it's being used for something else, rather than having it broken down in through the season, the playing season itself.
If you could tell yourself one thing at the beginning of your career that would better prepare you for the road ahead, what would that be?
Wow. There's a lot of things I could ask myself that I should have known better. I mean, I suppose the one thing that I've really learned in my 40 years, and if I'm taking it in terms of just work itself, you're never going to have a good day every day. And you have to just kind of take that, and that's just one of those things you're just going to get smashed in the face, and you just need to wipe the blood off, get back up and crack on. And I think it's so easy just to kind of we're in high pressure jobs, right? So we're not having one of these where we just go home, switch the computer off, and we don't worry about it until 9:30 the next day. I mean, I go home and then I check the data, the live data that we've got. I've got a camera, so I can check the camera to make sure my light rigs are still working. You're completely immersed in it, and you have to accept that fact. But for me, I think you're going to have dark days. You're going to have days where mentally you're absolutely exhausted and you've completely smashed yourself up. You're not giving yourself the breaks that you deserve, you should get, and you should have. And I think one thing I've learned as I've got older is probably more actually down to my mental health than anything else, is just acknowledging the fact that you can't do everything. And it shouldn't be, you shouldn't put it on yourself that you have to do everything. So don't get me wrong, I think you working hard and having that ethic is a fine balance, but you don't want to get to that point where it turns into a dark space where the anxiety starts to take over. And then the mind is a brilliant and wonderful tool, but it can chew you up proper if you let it. And I think having that ability just to be able to speak to somebody and acknowledge the fact that you can't do something, it takes a brave man to do that, and just stand up and just go, do you know what? I can't do it. And I'm going to just take a step back here now and one thing I would say is that that's not a full-time feeling. Like life in general, it's full of ups and downs, and you get nice plateaus for a little while, and then something will go wrong, and then you have a big old crash, and then it all picks back up again. And I think for me, if I was talking to my younger self, I think it's just to acknowledge the fact that life can't be brilliant all the time. It's just, you just got to learn that but then you have to acknowledge that it's not forever. I look back on it now and I'm thinking, wow, yeah, okay, I've had some times in my life where it's just not been how I wanted it to be, and I've not felt great about things, but overall it's an absolute drop in the ocean with regards to the highs and the good feelings and everything else I have, and it's that you need to try and focus on more than anything else. And I think it helps to kind of bring balance and clarity to everything as well. You have to have the lows to feel the highs, right? That's what they say. And it's true. It is true. I think you do have to have, right, everything's gone wrong. This didn't happen. That didn't happen. I've been criticised for this. And then you just got to take it on the chin, and you just got to, right, I've just got to work it. I've just got to work the situation. I'm just going to work it out. I'm just going to work my way out of this. And that's my default. My default is to work my way out of things. And it's, like I say, it's worked to date, but I think it's one of those that you definitely have to acknowledge that you can't do everything. That would be my big thing to say to myself, because I was one of those when I was younger. I was still doing 70-hour weeks, but I was still going out every night and drinking. So you can't do that. You're enjoying life at the time, but you can't sustain that. So it's just being able to acknowledge that you need a different focus in life. I've had loads of conversations as well, really, with just having something other than work. And it's difficult in this job because obviously it chews up so much time. But it's really important that you've got a focus other than work. So big change for me was when I became a father. I think when I became a dad for the first time, I mean, that was a proper flick the switch moment. It's just like, wow, it's just like really started to acknowledge now that it's just not all about work. But it's not only that though, but it repurposed what I was trying to do. So where I was doing everything for me, and I wanted to be successful, and I wanted to see how my life went, and aim as high as I possibly could. As soon as I had a family, I did everything for them then. So it just repurposed everything. It was just like, right, okay, now I know what I need to do. And I want to be successful because I want them to have a good life. I want them to also understand that by working hard, you're successful. There's no luck. Sometimes there is an element of, it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's the kind of saying we have over here, where it's just like, sometimes you don't need to know everything, but if you know the right people, you can get somewhere. But for me, I'd like to see that my kids would look at me and thinking, wow, Dad's leaving at 5 o'clock in the morning. He's not coming back till 7 o'clock at night. And he's working in London. And he's doing long hours and all the rest of it. But we've got a nice life. So I can see why he's doing what he's doing. It's like things don't just happen. I'm really desperate for my kids to understand that, because I think they flick YouTube on and think you just have a house with a swimming pool just by blogging. So trying to get them to understand that it doesn't work like that.
Oh gosh, absolutely not. I have no idea how we have gotten to the point where we make people who film their lives billionaires or millionaires, whatever they are right now. It's insane to me. I don't know how that happened.
No, I'm of an age now where I just can't quite comprehend it. I'm happy if I can just find any video on YouTube that actually it enriches me a little bit. But unfortunately, trying to filter through all the crap, it's hard work.
Yep. That's probably the best way to put it. So we sort of wrap up each podcast with this question. Especially with it being, I think we're 4 weeks away from our seniors graduating from high school. Do you have any words of advice for our kids, whether they're going for college, university, or if they're entering turf grass, if they're entering a different type of workforce? What would be your best words of advice and preparing them for what's out there entering the real world?
Wow. Don't be scared to try. I think I'd rather try and fail than not try and be sat there thinking, well, there's no point in thinking 2 years on, I wish I'd tried that. I wish I was brave enough to make that step or make that decision. You can't get it right all the time. That's one thing you just need to acknowledge. It's just, you're not going to get everything right all the time. It's just not possible. So you just have to acknowledge there's going to be some failures, but I'd rather try and fail than not try at all. And I think that's with everything. So if you think there's a qualification out there that you've been asked to do that they think is going to enrich you and you're too scared to try it, or if you're going to be given an experience to go and work abroad and you're too scared to leave home, try it. What's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to go out there and you go, actually, yeah, this is crap as what I thought it was going to be. I'm going to go home. It's not the end of the world, but you never know. You might go out there and you think, Jesus, I could live here. This is the life for me. And before you know it, you've made a step in your life that's you're never gonna get that to experience that unless you make that choice. So I think for me it's that don't be scared to try, and that's with anything. Like I say, I think it's living with regret sometimes is the hardest thing than to not have tried and failed, if that makes sense. I think I'd rather have tried and failed. So, do you know what? I had a go at it and it didn't work out for me. Life's not over just because something didn't work. That for me, that's probably the bit of advice I'd give to the kids.
Absolutely incredible. We cannot thank you enough for taking the time. It was an absolute blast to hear about everything, and we really can't thank you enough.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you so much for being on. No
problem. Yeah, one thing I can do is talk. I had plenty of time. That's one of the skill sets I've picked up where I used to be a shy kid who didn't want to talk to anybody. But when I get in my flow, I'm quite difficult. There's a few people that vouch for that. So you've just got to experience it.
Again, we can't thank you enough. It really helps our kids and with everything we're trying to do. So again, thank you.
Yeah, but like I say, I'm on Twitter, so if you want to DM me or anything on that, just feel free. I mean, I've got no issues. If I can find the time to answer any other questions that people might have had that didn't want to ask or anything like that, then knock yourself out. I'll always normally pick up my DMs. So